The name Mor'du struck fear in almost every character that appeared in Pixar's Brave, and after seeing the extent of his bloodlust, it's clear why that was the case. But it seems like before he became a bear, Mor'du's character had much more depth to him than that. Before Mor'du's animalistic nature took over, his soul was once human, much like Queen Elinor was before she was transformed into a bear. And according to Pixar, though he was once a prince, Mor'du's life had a tragic undertone throughout it that led him to become the beast that fans all saw in Brave. Before he became the deadly beast known as Mor'du, a prince whose name had long been forgotten was once set to become the next ruler of the land before everything tragically slipped away from him. While Brave gave viewers a brief description of Mor'du's past life before he turned into a massive, bloodthirsty black bear, it wasn't until Pixar expanded on his backstory in their animated short The Legend of Mor'du that his pain could truly be understood. According to the legend, a man who became Mor'du was once a royal prince of a powerful kingdom whose name had apparently been forgotten long after it fell. At the time, the kingdom was ruled by a single king who was stated in the short to be wise and beloved by everyone in his land. The king had 4 sons, with the one who became known as Mor'du being the eldest. But as you know from Brave, simply being the eldest prince in line to become the next king clearly didn't make Mor'du's life any easier. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become the deadly bear that he was shown to be. It turned out, according to the legend of Mor'du, that the king only saw the strongest qualities in each of his children. The youngest prince was described as wise, the second youngest was believed to be compassionate, and the third youngest was just, all great and redeeming qualities that the king was happy to pass on. His eldest son was different, though. Instead of being noticed for any sort of kindness or positive act, the eldest son was only ever noticed for his strength, which the animated short explained was mistaken for his character. The wise king knew that his son was driven by his physical prowess rather than mental stability, and on his deathbed made a decision that would affect Mor'du's life and started to lead him on a fast path to becoming the monstrous bear that became a legend. On his deathbed, the king made a decision that he believed was best for the kingdom, but ended up pitting all 4 of his children against one another, the exact opposite of what he wanted. According to the legend of Mor'du, before his death, instead of passing the throne down to his rightful heir, his eldest son, the king made a rash decision. He decided to divide his massive kingdom up into 4 equal pieces and named each one of his sons a king of their respective lands. And his reason for doing so was actually really clear, for he believed that the bond between his 4 children was strong enough to keep the kingdom united and peaceful. But what he didn't account for was how that would make his eldest son feel, the prince who rightfully should have been named the next king of the entire kingdom. The amount of disrespect that the elder prince felt was channeled into a rage, and it was around that time, when he was faced with no other options, the prince showed his first signs of savagery. While at a meeting with his 3 brothers, according to the short, the prince who would become Mor'du declared that he was the rightful heir to the throne and that he was the only true leader of their kingdom. And to prove that he wouldn't respect his father's wishes by letting his brothers rule alongside him, the eldest brother took his axe and shattered the family stone. This created a strong symbol that literally separated him from the rest of his family, and there was no longer any sign of peace between the siblings. The legend of Mor'du showed that each of the princes culminated their own forces, and a massive war broke out between all 4 sides to determine who would become the true leader of their kingdom. The war was waged on land and on the sea as the 4 princes fought for their right to be crowned king. And though the eldest prince had the upper hand and superior army, the war never progressed for any side, and instead each of the opposing armies was left in a deadly and seemingly endless stalemate. That is, until the eldest prince discovered a way that he believed would take him to victory, only to be surrounded by death and tragedy. You see, the eldest brother felt that he had to change his destiny in one way or another in order to claim the throne for himself. Little did he know his choice would end up leading him to a life of bloodlust and solitude. According to the legend of Mor'du, while searching for a way to change his fate, the king's eldest son stumbled across the same menhir ring that Merida found in Brave, and while in the menhir ring, much like Merida, the prince began noticing small will-o-wisps floating around as if they were guiding him to where he needed to go. The eldest prince followed the trail of wisps to a dark loch where he noticed a witch's cottage located far offshore, and after going inside, he all but sealed his fate and locked his life in as being one that was filled with blood and tragedy. After he entered the cottage, the prince spoke with the witch and persuaded her into making a spell for him. According to the Pixar short, the eldest brother traded her his signet ring in return for a potion that was supposed to give him the strength of 10 men. But when the witch handed the potion over to the prince, she gave him a choice. He was told that he could either consume the potion and fulfill his dark wish, or use the spell to heal his family's tattered bonds. The prince had a decision to make, and according to the short, he chose the darker one. After conducting what was supposed to be a peaceful meeting with his siblings, the eldest brother presented his younger brothers with an option. He asked that they bend the knee and swear their allegiance to him and make him the rightful king. The brothers didn't like the idea of his plan, though, and they protested the meeting in general. This is when when their oldest brother made a decision that changed his life forever and not for the better. The oldest prince decided to drink the potion then and there, only instead of gaining the strength of 10 men in a practical manner, the potion that the witch gave him turned him into a massive black bear. And out of his lust to be the only king, he accepted the fact that he was now a bear and used his newfound strength to kill the other 3 princes. Mor'du's anger had finally overtaken him, and after living a life where things didn't go as they were intended for him, he was slowly being molded into a villain. After the death of his 3 brothers, the eldest prince, who was still in the form of a massive black bear, decided to gather his army and name himself the king. But according to the legend, that didn't go quite as planned. You see, his troops didn't recognize the prince in his new form, and instead all they saw in front of them was a black bear whom they attacked out of fear. Once again, rage took over and Mor'du began striking back at his men whom he believed had forsaken him, and with the strength of 10 men began slowly slaughtering the soldiers in his army. All of this bloodshed not only led to Mor'du's army dismantling, but according to Pixar's short, it also led to the decimation of the other princes' armies and the collapse of their once great kingdom. At that point, Mor'du's tragic life had all but disappeared, and the prince's mind and consciousness were eventually overwritten by the black bear's animalistic instincts. As Mor'du continued to roam the lands as a terrifying, bloodthirsty black bear, the remnants of the other princes' armies began forming their own clans, which would become the big clans that Pixar showed coming together in Brave. All of the clans aligned themselves under the leadership of Fergus, Merida's father, and he was one of the few people who had faced Mor'du and lived. Though it did cost Fergus his leg, this was the last time that Mor'du had been heard from for over a decade, although that didn't necessarily mean it was the end of the bear's dark and tragic life. Now is when Pixar's Brave takes over in telling the story of Mor'du and the tragic life that turned him into such a bloodthirsty, devilish beast. As the Pixar movie showed us, after she unintentionally turned her mother into a bear, Merida and Queen Elinor set out on a journey to revert the witch's spell. It was then that Merida discovered the truth of Mor'du's past and that, much like her mother, he was once a human as well. However, as Brave showed us, by that point the bloodlust had taken over Mor'du entirely, and when he saw Merida on his territory, he not only attacked her but even tracked her and Elinor after they got away. Little did Mor'du know that his next encounter with the princess would finally be the meeting that set him free from his tragic life. In Brave, after following the Queen and Merida to the Menhir Ring, Mor'du once again attacked everyone that was present. Only this time the chaos got the better of him, and after Elinor, who was still a bear, jumped in to save her daughter, the prince's life was put to an end. One of the massive stone tablets that made up the ring was shifted during the fight and ended up falling right on top of the massive black bear as it tried to get to Merida one last time. Following the death of Mor'du, Merida noticed the prince's spirit rise through the stone, and anyone watching would have recognized the thankful look that he shared with her. It was as if he had finally been able to find peace in an otherwise long and agonizing life before he inevitably turned into a wisp. What do you think? Did the prince's tragic life cause him to make the decisions that ultimately transformed him into Mor'du, or would he have chosen strength over family no matter what, considering he was always the strongest? Make sure you let us know what you think in the comments below.